My thoughts kept drifting back to that one day and to him. I was 60 years old, a widow for almost a decade, and my life had fallen into a predictable, if not comforting, rhythm. But that peace, that quiet routine, it all shattered the moment Ethan entered my life. He was young, much younger than I had any business paying attention to. But something about him tugged at a part of me I thought had long been buried. It was that same summer day when I first felt the shift. Ethan, the new gardener, was out in the yard, tending to the roses that had been left to wilt under my neglect. He caught me staring, his shirt clinging to his back, sweat glistening on his skin under the hot sun. I should have looked away, but I couldn't. When he glanced up and our eyes met, it felt like the world stopped. There was a charge, an unspoken understanding, and the flutter in my chest made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. Later that evening, after my quiet dinner and the house had fallen into a stillness, I wandered to the garden, unable to shake the memory of his gaze. And there he was, still working, his strong hands moving deftly through the plants. I watched him for a while before he finally straightened and turned toward me, his face softening into a smile. "Evelyn," he said, my name rolling off his tongue in a way that made my breath hitch. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the cool night air. Without thinking, I reached out and touched his arm. That was all it took. The next moment, his lips were on mine, soft but insistent, and my body responded before my mind could catch up. I don't know what came over me that night, but there was no stopping what followed. We moved inside, to the small parlor where I spent so many quiet evenings alone. But tonight, the air was charged with something different, something dangerous and exhilarating. Ethan kissed me again, his hands exploring my body with a fervor I hadn't felt in years. The weight of his touch sent sparks through me, awaking desires I'd forgotten. The wrongness of it danced at the edge of my mind, but I pushed it away, drowning in the pleasure and heat of the moment. His body pressed against mine, and for the first time in so long, I felt wanted, craved. Every kiss, every touch was a reminder of the woman I used to be, the woman I still was, somewhere deep inside. The night air wrapped around us as his lips pressed against mine, igniting a fire I hadn't felt in years. Ethan's hands slid to the small of my back, pulling me closer until our bodies were flush against each other. The warmth of his skin seeped through my thin dress, and I could feel the strength beneath his touch. Yet there was a softness in the way his fingers trailed up my spine, as if he was discovering me with reverence. My breath caught as his lips moved from mine, tracing a slow path along my jaw and down my neck, each kiss leaving a trail of heat in its wake. I found myself responding in a way that felt natural, inevitable, as though we had been leading to this moment all along. My hands roamed over his broad shoulders, feeling the tension in his muscles, the way they rippled under my touch. His scent, earthy and clean, mixed with the lingering fragrance of roses, intoxicated me, making me lightheaded. As we stumbled backward toward the house, the world blurred around us. I could feel the coolness of the night on my skin, but his warmth grounded me, tethering me to the moment, to him. Inside, the dim light from the hallway cast soft shadows across the room, and in the quiet stillness, the only sound was our breathing, heavy and synchronized. Ethan's hand slid beneath my dress, his touch sending a shiver through me as he lifted the fabric higher, bearing more of my skin to the cool air in his warm hands. I gasped, but there was no hesitation as I let myself be lost in the way he made me feel. Desired, cherished, alive in a way I hadn't been in years. And as his lips found mine again, I surrendered completely to the passion between us, knowing there was no going back. The next morning, reality hit me like a wave crashing on the shore. As I sat alone in the kitchen, sipping my coffee, guilt gnawed at me. What had I done? Ethan was half my age, and though last night had been magical, I knew there would be consequences. I had spent so long convincing myself I was content with my solitude, and now, with a single reckless act, everything had changed. But even as I regretted it, I couldn't deny the pleasure I had felt, the way he made me feel alive again. There was something addictive in that feeling, and I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't be the last time. The second time it happened, I told myself it would be the final time. Ethan and I were alone in the kitchen. He didn't say a word, but his gaze told me everything. I didn't resist when he pulled me into his arms, his lips finding mine once again with a hunger that mirrored my own. This time was different, more urgent, more desperate. The weight of what we were doing hung over us, but neither of us cared. We made our way to the living room, and in the soft glow of the lamp, he kissed me like I was something precious, something he couldn't bear to lose. His hands roamed my body with a gentleness that made my heart ache. And as we sank onto the couch together, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Not out of sadness, but out of the overwhelming emotion that came with being held, with being desired. There was something different this time. Something more intense, more urgent. As Ethan pulled me into his arms, his gaze locked onto mine, communicating everything that words couldn't. His kiss was hungrier, more desperate, like he was afraid this moment might slip away. My heart pounded as his hands moved with a deliberate slowness, trailing over my arms, my sides, as though he was memorizing every inch of me. The living room, bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, felt like a world apart, a cocoon where nothing but the two of us existed. We sank onto the couch, the cushions soft beneath us. But it was his touch that enveloped me, that filled the spaces I hadn't realized were empty. His lips brushed over mine again, but this time they lingered, exploring, savoring. My hands found his chest, the steady beat of his heart beneath my fingertips, grounding me even as the world seemed to spin. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if he was afraid to break me, but the way his hands roamed over my body spoke of a longing that matched my own. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but it wasn't from sadness. It was the overwhelming emotion of being held, of being seen, of being wanted in a way I thought I had forgotten. Ethan's hands wiped it away, his thumb lingering on my cheek as he kissed me again, softly, tenderly. His body moved against mine, slow and sure, And in that moment, it wasn't about urgency or need. It was about the connection between us, the way he made me feel cherished, like I was something precious. The outside world faded, and all that was left was the sensation of him, his warmth, his touch, his breath mingling with mine, and the knowledge that this was exactly where I was meant to be. But as the passion ebbed and the room filled with the quiet hum of the night, reality began to seep back in. I lay in his arms, my mind racing with guilt and fear. What would people say? What would happen when the inevitable end came? This could never last. There were too many obstacles, too many reasons why it was wrong. Yet, as I looked up at Ethan, his eyes soft and filled with an affection I hadn't seen in years, I couldn't bring myself to care. I wanted him. I needed him. But I also knew that this affair, no matter how intoxicating, was built on borrowed time. Eventually, we would have to face the consequences of our choices. And when that day came, I wasn't sure if my heart would survive the fallout. But for now, I let myself sink into his embrace, savoring every fleeting moment, knowing that whatever came next, I would never forget the way he made me feel.